The Gatekeepers of Artistic Morality. I was listening to David Starkey talk about the history of art recently. Using the furious vigour and rhetorical quips that he is known for, I could not help but fall into the spell that he was weaving. But it was towards the end of his talk, where he took the audience through the birth of modernism and the highly negative impact that Duchamp had on the arts in the Western world, that I was struck by something. Duchamp was, of course, the famed Dadaist and anti-art creator most well known for his work, Fountain, a so-called ready-made created from an upturned urinal. This satire of the art world itself changed culture forever. As I finished the lecture, a question lingered in my mind that I could not answer at the time. How was this allowed to happen? To put it another way, if Duchamp had launched his works and talked of his ideas even a mere 60 years before, he would have been, at best, laughed out of society and all mention of him totally forgotten. It is clear then that the creation of the art alone is not enough for its recognition, and just like if Duchamp created his work during the Tudor period it would be scorned, art at the wrong time will be censored by society. For the artist to exhibit and the ideologies behind the work to propagate, the society of a time must allow it. Society acts as the gatekeeper of artistic morality. The question we are left with is, at what time is certain art allowed? An answer to this might come in the current narrative of the artistic world. This alludes to the thought that we have been through a progression in art, from the primitive art of the ancients, to the celebrations of form and classical work, the intricacies of design in the Renaissance masters. But it is only in the modern era that the artist has truly been set free. This story may seem to the listener similar to the infamous Whig view of history, and there is reason for that, as this idea of artistic progression is undeniably liberal in its nature. From this paradigm one could say that Duchamp followed the progress of society. Only the advanced thinking and understanding of the modern man could understand the true importance of his work. Looking to today, many might say that we've progressed even further than Duchamp could have ever imagined, and art is now totally free from all traditions and inhibitions. It was only a few months ago that Madonna's daughter took part in an Art Basel performance piece called Love Different, which some commentators described as a simulated orgy. Can the boundaries of art be pushed any further? Superficially, this idea of artistic progress looks correct, but when we investigate further we start to see that the idea does not hold up. In 2018, a small but noteworthy National Trust property put on an exhibition to celebrate the life of the wife of the industrialist who lived there. As part of this exhibition, it was decided to cover up all of the artworks made by men during the duration of the show. This action was swiftly decried and the sheets removed, but the cracks in the idea of artistic progression have started to show. More recently, we can see the censorious nature of certain special interest groups being adopted by the artistic world. In 2019, the Saatchi Gallery covered up an artwork which was considered blasphemous for containing Islamic texts and nude images in its composition. The true nature of the gatekeeping of artistic morality is being revealed more and more every day. One does not have to watch a programme about classic art before we hear the commentator talking about the male gaze, or we see how ideology derived from the post-colonial mindset will be used to curtail and remove our artistic heritage from view. If then there is no clear progression in artistic morality, what other models should we consider? It seems clear to me that the way that Pareto, when talking about the elite class, identifies the real truth behind who controls the power to censor. He describes a situation in which an elite class rules a society. The class is split up between ruling and non-ruling elites, and that there is a constant battle going on for power between different groups looking to overthrow the current incumbent. We can see how this framework can be used to understand who controls the power in the art world. Rather than a straight line of progress and freedom, we have a series of battles between different groups of elites. When a revolution occurs, the morals that a certain group has is imposed on society. We can see this in the various secessionist movements of the 19th century. Here, one set of artists decides that the morals and ideals of the mainstream is not suitable and attempts to overthrow them. The Viennese secession, for example, broke away from the academy, set up its own exhibitions, found their own patrons, and made their own art in parallel. In time, they became the mainstream itself, overthrowing one elite and imposing their ideas on the local artistic community. It's worthy of note that the secession itself split into two groups based around ideologies in time. Either way, it's clear that we are in a position of constant struggle for the morality of a nation. The cultural society, that is, the elements which create, maintain and interact with culture, should be understood as unique parts of the whole, with each being individually susceptible to revolutions. We can therefore create a hierarchy of moralistic power where certain elements have more control over enforcements than others, and I believe it to look something like this. The power flows from left to right, from the commissioner to the artist, the law, bodies, academy, elites, and finally the people. At the beginning of humans' artistic and cultural endeavours, time was in short supply. Only those that had the wealth and power to employ dedicated craftspeople were able to produce art. We see this idea carry on well into what we consider modernity, with Holman Hunt describing the situation of artists in 1850. Artists had to work mainly on a sort of charitable sufferance from the rich, who were not always more than fashionably refined. Here we see the formation of the commissioner. He is the man that requests the work, or makes the eventual purchase. This role in itself can be subdivided into one of four people: the master, the dealer, the church, or the state. The master as archetype has itself a few variations. There is, for example, the artistic soul trapped in the life of a capitalist, the man who wanted to become an artist, having to follow in his father's footsteps and join him in trade. While he sacrificed his creativity, he gains capital, and reaching maturity finds himself free from financial burdens and wishes to support the work of others through commissions. Karl Wittgenstein, the renowned German steel magnate, is a perfect example of this. He lived a creative and eclectic early life before settling down in the family business of steel. He would eventually fund many elements of the Viennese secession. Another kind of master is someone who wishes to display his superiority through art. A propagandist of sorts, he may wish to show how pious he is, placing himself at the centre of some great biblical scheme, or maybe invoking the noble traditions of the past to reflect some element of himself. Nicholas Rollin, who commissioned the magnificent Virgin with Child and Chancellor Rollin, takes a central position in this work. Dressed in the latest magnificent velvets, and praying to Jesus, who sits cheerfully on his mother's lap opposite to him. The church itself has played a pivotal part in the lives of artistic endeavour. Their requirements are usually in the form of ornamenting ritual or a church. Pope Julius II's constant sponsorship of Raphael allowed the artist to create some of his most magnificent works. Note how a highly powerful figure in the church might act as both master and church, such as a cardinal commissioning art for a church, and then placing himself at the centre of it. The state simply wishes to grow, and art has been a way for a state to enforce its morality and ideas, using art as a propaganding and recruitment tool. Consider Soviet realism, looking to showcase the exemplar work of the modern communist man. Again, we can see the dual role in the form of the absolutist monarch, Louis XIV, when commissioning works, acts as both state and master. The dealer is a very different beast, for he is trying to scrape a living from artistic endeavour, using his networks and skills to identify and launch unknowns, hoping to reap on their future fame. He is the cross between a critic and a gambler. He places bets wherever he makes a purchase. Durand Ruel is credited as the man who launched the Impressionists. He championed their work, paid artists various stipends, and put on the first Impressionist shows. He also leaves us with an interesting comment about the launch of the Impressionists. Without America, I would have been lost, ruined, after having bought so many Monets and Renoirs. The two exhibitions there in 1886 saved me. The American public bought moderately, but thanks to that public, Monet and Renoir were enabled to live, and after that the French public followed suit. Here we can see the artistic morality of America more compatible with the Impressionist artist. Only with a change of elite would France accept their work. Each of these commissioners has, at a moment's notice, to build up an artist from nothing or to destroy him. If the morals of the artist and the work do not match his, he will stop it. Lest we forget Veronese's trial, the man brought to account by the Inquisition for displaying the Last Supper in a way that they felt was insincere and luxurious. A modern looking at these paintings today would laugh at the very concept, but still, the Church, through this trial, sent a message to all other artists about the morality being enforced. Not only can the commissioners select and reject artists, they can direct and influence them. The state may say, "I wish to show the dignity of the common man," or the master may say, "Depict Alexander the Great, victorious in battle." Either way, they will inevitably force the artist to push certain moralities. But how can one show Alexander triumphant without bringing forward his heroic nature? The commissioner might also have a direct relationship with the artist, working as a kind of collaborator, encouraging certain elements of work. And while moments like these are harder to see from the outside, conversations about what a commissioner likes and dislikes will affect most artists that wish to maintain that relationship. One observation of the artistic age we live in might be that the commissioners of our age have simply given up their responsibilities as gatekeepers wholly to the artist. There might be some truth in this, but I do wonder if this is more to do with the fact that most modern commissioners are either the state or dealers, the latter of which is more focused on money rather than morality. The artist is the next gatekeeper of importance, for it is inevitable that his ideologies, whether he realises it or not, will be put into his work. Even when a scene is thrust upon him, he must respond to the passions involved and the momentary characteristics of each figure presented. The artist can act against the commissioner, but only in a way that is subversive and subtle. Beardsley was famous for his love of crass vulgarities, and various editors and publishers were constantly trying to prevent him from showing them. The law acts as a hard barrier to morality, effectively and efficiently restricting types of art from the mainstream. Examples of this would be blasphemy laws, restrictions on nudity, or even the blocking of the human image in periods of iconoclasm. Of these, without doubt, the most severe and damaging to the moral ability of art is the restriction of the human image, for we cannot even have the most basic forms of morality displayed, heroism, justice, truth, without showing man. The next level of hierarchy represents the various organisations conjured up to push a certain elite morality. They are the bodies and come in two forms, the legal and the lobbying. The legal body acts as a policeman, patrolling the streets and highways of culture, cracking the skulls of any that fall short of its standards with its proverbial truncheon. If we turn to advertising, which I would argue is a kind of art, albeit in its most base form, we can see bodies like the ASA which rigorously control what can and can't be displayed. The key difference between legal bodies and the law is that the former is not an absolute ruling power, but will make recommendations and approach transgressions on a case-by-case basis. This flexibility allows for more rapid change, and more importantly, ideological hypocrisy. Everyone is familiar with the tube advertising fiasco from a few years ago, where the bikini-clad advert on the left was banned, but the diverse advert on the right was not only allowed, but celebrated. We can see the moral influence being manipulated in the arts in the form of Arts Council England, or ACE, the organisation which holds the purse strings to a large number of museums and art institutions in the UK. As part of their creative case for diversity policies, quote, all portfolio organisations are required to integrate diversity into all areas of their works as a condition of their funding. This is codified as a point system where organisations are rated by their diversity, with more points receiving more funding. There is no difference between this and a Soviet system where only those institutions devoted to the party with works that fulfil the state's morality are selected. These kinds of funding bodies persist outside of the democratic state structures. ACE was set up in the Blair era and has its ideological tendencies baked in. Only its removal will cause meaningful change. The lobby body is a form of pressure group, organising around a specific issue or community. Its singular goal is to enforce its morality via coercion, intrigue and finance. Examples of this have been censorship groups such as Mary Whitehouse, or the Catholic National League of Decency, which effectively stopped certain kinds of content being shown in America. The key thing to note here is that in both cases the lobby groups were connected to a large, pre-existing group of people, such as a homogeneous religious group, or people with a shared identity or ideology. Gramsci specifically highlighted this as an effective tool for the proliferation of Marxist ideologies by organising and using outgroups as lobby groups. We can see this today in the modern period with minority groups pressuring organisations to create explicit celebration, days and committees to push these values. These bodies set many societal norms and are a powerful tool in convincing a nation to a specific way of thinking. The Academy has some control over artistic morality, but their strength of control is less from a structural perspective than one might think. We've already mentioned how susceptible to revolution they are. Many are tied into funding from commissioners and bodies and have to follow the laws of the land. The main power that these institutions have is in the setting of artistic tone through exhibition, indoctrination of the next generation of artists, exhibition of new artists, and the creation of critics. Think of the Royal Academy, which not only puts on regular retrospectives, highlights specific artists which suits the personal tastes and ideas of the board, but it will also showcase new artists which align with the same frameworks, either through active external promotion or internal networking. What is taught will also be remembered, and if the teacher says to abandon all tradition, many pupils will. If the teacher praises novelty over all else, the student will learn and a generation of novelty will follow. Often, institutional teaching can have negative consequences on the artistic ability. This was recognised as far back as 1911, with the arts and crafts artificer C.R. Ashby writing on the subject with his book, Should We Stop Teaching Art?, where he brings a number of criticisms in the Academy's current ability to produce artists of worth, highlighting the fact that many that train as artists often themselves become teacher, in turn teaching others to teach. The role of the critic is something overlooked but still important. They often serve as a champion of a cause or ideology. Personal loves and vendettas affect their recommendations, as do money and employment. Like the Pied Piper of old, he can play the tune that others follow, raising the artist with a 5-star review or damning a work with ill praise. The final area of consideration is in an artwork's general reception, both of those in the know, in the form of elites, and those not, in the form of the general public. These general elites do have some sway in controlling the morality of art. We can imagine the lofty rooms of the Victorian saloons, where the well-heeled pursue the latest and greatest of their nation's culture. If they were to see something that broke their core morality, there would be scandal, letters to the Times, boycotts, and more. This form of elite outrage has happened many times through history. The displaying of Manet's Olympia in 1865, for instance, caused a huge controversy at the time. Journalist Antonin Proust recalled, "If the canvas of Olympia was not destroyed, it was only because of the precautions that were taken by the administration. Why were people upset almost to violence over something that we would consider today to be very tame? There's a few simple reasons for this. It was not necessarily the nudity that was shocking, but the subject matter. A prostitute as subverted Venus, laying softly on a bed similar to that of one of Titian's Venuses, a woman who carried all of the marks of her trade as laid out before the viewer. Even her name was commonplace among the working girls of the day." Zola said of it, "When our artists give us Venuses, they correct nature, they lie." Edouard Manet asked himself, why lie, why not tell the truth? He introduced us to Olympia, this feel of our time, who you meet on the sidewalks. Rather than looking to the distance, she stares directly at you, placing the viewer in the position of the client. No doubt many red-faced monsieurs in the saloon would have been very familiar with that view and embarrassed to be shown as hypocrites in front of their wives. One of the most interesting and underplayed aspects of this scandal is its challenge to the purpose of art. For centuries, artists would claim that their role is in the pursuit of beauty, truth and goodness, reflecting the transcendentals in their work. But how is one meant to find the transcendentals in the body of a prostitute? All three of these points are derived from an ideology both romantic and liberal in their root, and in my opinion mark the beginning of the end of elite art. In 1890, the French government acquired Olympia after a public subscription led by Claude Monet. The hierarchies of morality had shifted in a mere 25 years. The earliest gatekeeper is the common man. He is unversed in the intricacies of the art world and can only view much of art superficially. If you show him a pretty painting, he will admire it, but he will not understand the subtle symbology or references that are at the core of the work. As the people are generally outside the usual artistic sphere, much of what goes on inside the world of arts passes him by, and he does not care. But there are occasions where public work, which is so outrageous, the populace riots. One has only to turn to certain parts of the world to see the people rise up against many forms of artistic work. And so we come to an end. As you go, just remember that we are not living in a golden age of artistic freedom, but merely living within the confines of a moral code controlled by these gatekeepers. And to answer our original question, how was Duchamp allowed to do this? Did he smash through the doors of society? No, he was let in.